Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining Hello 2021. Go from thoughts to results in your brain. My name is Matt Caton, and we are very, very excited to be joined today by performance coach and Power Brain user, longtime Power Brain user, Omer Aziz. Welcome to the presentation, Omer.
Well, thank you very much, Matt. I'm really excited to be here today. I'm looking forward to this.
Great. And thank you everyone for joining us today. You know, with the new year always comes New Year's resolutions. And that was sort of the premise of today's webinar. How can you take your goals and actually bring them to fruition? And we've got many, many different options within the Brain application to share with you today, whether you're just taking checklists, notes, collecting information, how you organize that information, the methodologies that you choose to take your idea, your vision from just that, a goal, an idea, a thought, to actual fruition, to making that vision come to life. And so many different options to share with you today. One of them is actually in the brain that I am presenting right now. Got this brain open on my screen, and this particular brain database will be made available to you after today's webinar. You'll be all sent a link. Everyone that joined today's call will be sent a link, and you can actually download a copy of this brain just to utilize for your own brainstorming or your own idea collection. Review some of the topics that we covered today in more detail that are fleshed out in this particular brain. And I believe that Omer will have a brain for you to download as well with some of his methodologies that Omer uses. But in this particular brain, let me take you on a really, really quick tour. Now, we're assuming today that you're joining today's webinar, you're familiar with the Brain software. If not, you can visit our website, www.thebrain.com, download a 30-day free trial of the Brain software, and get started using the application to map out your own ideas, start taking notes, and utilize the features that we're highlighting and sharing with you today. If you are not familiar, you're just getting started with the application, I would encourage you to join a Brain 101 call that we have every Friday. Brain 101 takes you through the basics of brain building. Now you'll see us today maybe creating some new thoughts from time to time, adding notes and attachments to those thoughts. I'll take you through specifically, very slowly, how that process is done in a Brain 101 webinar that's held every Friday. But let's go ahead and take a quick tour of my brain that I have open, my Hello 2021 brain, from thoughts to results. Now, there's no specific goal in this particular brain that I'm mapping out. This brain is the methodologies, the research, the process behind mapping out your vision. And as you can see, I've got a note on the very first thought with a nice little quote that I keep in my brain: a goal without a plan is just a dream. So you have to have the plan, you have to have the groundwork to actually make these ideas come to life. And as you can see, the very first thought that I'm going to click on, brainstorming with the brain, will take you down to two key processes that you can review: visualizing decisions with no limit brainstorming. That's a brain video that we did not too long ago. And also a particular area that I like, this is Alex Osborne's, he's an author, his rules of brainstorming. And this is a great place to start. And there's basically 4 steps to brainstorming. Focus on quantity. Withhold criticism. And let's just talk about those right away, right off the bat. Get everything that you need into your brain in some capacity, whether it's, again, a note or just web pages you like, thoughts, documents, get it in. You can always come back later and we can advance all the way down to step 4, where you start combining and proving ideas. So that's where the refinement comes in. But first, just get that information in there. And an example that I like to share is if your passion is space travel, you want to go to the moon. that is a pretty ambitious task to get. If your goal is to go to the moon, very select individuals have ever been there in the past, and will probably in the foreseeable future might, we might stick with just those small numbers for a little while. So that might be a difficult goal to achieve. But along the way, don't filter, get that idea into the brain. You might start researching stargazing, maps, telescopes, classes that you could take on astronomy, astrology, whatever the related information may be, which could in turn lead to a new passion, a new career choice, or get you closer to that goal than you ever thought possible. But again, no filtering, no judgment, withhold your own personal criticism, get those ideas into your brain and start mapping them out. And as you can see in this area of the brain, it falls under brainstorming, and it's also falling under the category of Alex Osborne. So I've got a key area in this brain with specific thinkers that I'm particularly interested in. Whether you've read this book, Applied Imagination with Alex Osborne, or Getting Things Done, we at TheBrain Technologies are very big fans of David Allen, GTD. Getting Things Done is a book that was written several years ago, picked up a lot of traction in all of our busy lives. And David Allen shares with you different ways to catalog your information, categorize your information. One of his basic rules is get your information into a trusted source. So it's always there. This organic brain that you take with you everywhere you go, not always necessarily considered to be a trusted source. I know mine isn't. I can be forgetful, can put things off, what have you. But if I map them out in my brain, and I've got different processes that I like to use, some of them came from David Allen, I'll eventually check my tasks off of my lists and confirm, verify in my busy life that I am achieving everything that I need to be doing, whether it's something important that needs to get done today or next month or further on down the road. And David actually maps out those ideas in his methodology. So if you could see, I can go down to the GTD methodology. Horizons of focus is the analogy that he uses. Your brain, you're running an airport, and you've got some planes that are on the runway that demands urgent attention. It needs to get taken care of right now, all the way up to things that are 10,000 feet up, 20,000, 30,000. So you can see we keep going further in the distance. I'm not immediately concerned with ideas, planes in this analogy, that are 50,000 feet away, 50,000 feet up. Those are my long-term life goals. So if I can create these categories and find out what's urgent and right in front of me versus what's a little bit further off, I can stay focused, take care of those runway issues, clear the runway, and make room for 10,000 feet, current projects, 20,000 feet, other areas of responsibility that I eventually need to get to. So that's this is a really well mapped out area, all of everything that falls under David Allen. Another area that I'm just going to barely touch on, because I have a feeling that Omer is going to take us into a little bit of further understanding on Nicholas Luhmann. So as you hear, or if you hear, Omer mention Nicholas Luhmann, know that one of the brains that we'll be making available for you today has a lot of his information available, his thought process and his idea on different ways to tackle, address, manage all of the multitude of different tasks and ideas and responsibilities that we have, so that you can, once again, stay productive and, most importantly, stay focused. So that's really just a quick view of some of the features of this particular brain that we'll be sharing with you today. And with that, I would like to pass the presenter over to Omer. And Omer is going to take you through, I believe, his real actual brain, and talk about different ways that he can actually stay focused and stay on task, and different ways that he collects and manages all of his ideas and responsibilities. So Omer, I'm going to send it over to you now.
So welcome everyone. I have to say, I've really been looking forward to this. As Shelley and Matt mentioned, it wasn't by design, but I seem to present kind of near the beginning of a year. So I'm kind of the how you want to frame out your year and maximize productivity person. So let me jump right into my brain. And this is the very, very top thought of my brain. I've been using personal brain now for almost 15 years. And I really wondered whether I should just show a demo or if I should show my actual brain. And I'm of the view that I need to show my actual brain so I can actually demonstrate a little bit around how my thinking has evolved the more I've continued to use it. And for people who are new users, my suggestion would be this is one of those pieces of software where, from my perspective, there's no reason to get intimidated by the functionality because you can start very simply. And when I first started using the brain, I created my home thought. The top of my brain is just my name, and I was very interested in the getting things done methodology. So as Matt mentioned, it was the first area that I wanted to not only incorporate the content of the book, but to actually let the content influence the way I'd structured my brain. So I created a thought type that was called guiding principles. And I just wrote down some very high level guiding principles when I first started using my brain. And then over time, those guiding principles have evolved into focus areas. And so again, it comes down to the terminology that you're comfortable with when it comes to productivity. So David Allen mentions horizons of focus, as did Matt. I've evolved my productivity approach into focus areas. So I've created a thought type called focus area. And over about the last decade or so, my focus areas have kind of settled into these 5 focus areas. So virtually everything I do either fits within my loved ones, my family, my friends, me trying to be as strong as I can be, me putting out content with no strings attached or expectations. My work is driving business operations and then building wealth over the long term. So everything I do fits into those focus areas. And if I go back to my main thought, one of the things that I always like jumping into is my reading list. So here's my reading list from last year. This isn't everything I read last year, but these are the books that really made an impact. So the getting things done thought types that I'm showing you here, and some of these I just play with ad hoc. So I've created one called salient points, and salient points is just kind of a reminder to me of the most important information that I want to see immediately for a thought. Will I keep salient points in the long term? I'm not sure, but I certainly enjoy experimenting with it and try to see. I think my fundamental driver for me is in creating thought types, is it clearly delineated from any other thought type? And I didn't have any thought type that kind of aggregates the very high level summary of a project, so that's why I created salient points. When I make the demo of this brain available, you'll find all these thought types are included. So feel free to use these thought types, use the colors if you like them, change it any which way you want. So if I go back here, I showed my 2021 reading list, and we're going to do a bit of a deeper dive on how to take smart notes, which is the book that features Nicholas Luhmann that Matt mentioned. I've also decided now that I have quite a few books within my brain, so I've decided to create a new thought called my all-time reading list. And this is kind of tracking. My goal here is to track my top 10 favorite books of all time. And last year feels like it was a really good year for reading because there's 2 books. There's Atomic Habits, How to Take Smart Notes. Both of those books are from last year. So last year was a good year for books from my perspective. So I'll probably add another book or 2 before this seminar started. I was thinking, okay, Scrum was a book I really, really liked. It's going to make my top 10 reading list. So I'm just going to include Scrum. And Anything else I want to show on the focus areas? I don't think so. I'm going to jump to how to take smart notes. So this is kind of a shift from the getting things done methodology to a completely different methodology. So how to take smart notes is written by a professor out of Germany. His name is Sankey Ahrens, and he's the one who writes about Niklas Luhmann. And he has a fascinating approach on productivity from an academic perspective. And basically, the key idea for smart notes is you should create what he calls a slip box of all of your ideas that are of interest to you, independent of any particular project that you're working on. So over time, this slip box becomes your treasure trove of ideas. And Niklas Luhmann was someone who took smart notes every day on a cue card, and it was one idea per cue card, in your own words, ready for public reading, public viewing. And he would put these cue cards in wooden boxes, and that's what he called slip boxes. And when he died, he had 90,000 notes in his slip box. And he published 58 books while he was alive. 6 more books were published posthumously, just from manuscripts lying around, and they were all born from the slip box. And so I decided to create a section of my brain that's totally separate from my projects, and I called it the slip box. And my thought types for, let me show you my slip box thought types. Bear with me here. So here it is. So with Slipbox, I only have a few thought types. I have the 2 main thought types are question, and question is basically any questions that you're pondering that supersede or above any particular projects, and then a smart note. And again, as I mentioned, a smart note is simply one coherent thought in your own words, ready for public viewing. So here's a small sample of a slip box. And basically what this represents, again, here are questions I'm pondering. And here are some smart notes that I've actually incorporated from other parts of my brain. And what you're looking at here is the digital equivalent of the same kind of slip box that Niklas Luhmann would have collected. But it's impossible, in my opinion, to manage 90,000 smart notes without some kind of technology. And I think the personal brain software, from my perspective, is the perfect technology to manage the smart notes approach. Even more so with version 12, which I'll demonstrate in a minute. So what you're looking at here are 7 or 8 questions that I'm basically pondering right now as part of my research and part of my consulting. And then also several smart notes that are basically coherent thoughts. In some cases, they're slides that I can apply in several different projects. This you could easily build in one day. What you're looking at here can be built in one day. And if you keep adding a few smart notes day over day over day, the compounding of it all is quite fascinating. And so now if I dive into this is my real brain with my real slip box, and I've got quite a few smart notes. At first, this looks like a very disorganized collection of notes. Hence, I created a second thought type within my slip box, and this thought type is simply a capture of topics of interest for me. And so the topics that are starting to emerge, these aren't topics that I start with. These are the topics that emerge as a result of smart notes clumping together. But these are the topics that are naturally bubbling up to the surface of areas of interest of mine, at least for 2021, for January 21st, 2021, here are the areas of interest for me. And again, they're built from smart notes that I've been collecting. So there's this idea of success disaster. This term comes from a book called Designing Your Life, two professors out of Stanford. And quite simply, the definition of success disaster. So I built a slide that I can just pull in wherever I need it, but it's in essence being successful in a job you hate. And in my consulting and my coaching so far, my sample size, or 100% of the people I've coached, 100% at some point have dealt with success disaster. And so the more smart notes I collected on success disaster, the more another theme started to emerge, which is this idea that career planning doesn't work. You can't plan your career, you have to design your career. And so if I do a post on LinkedIn on one of these topics, I bring the link to the post right into my brain. And so in essence, this is a form of a smart note. It's the very brief description of success disaster part 1 that I published on LinkedIn and that I import into my brain as a smart note. And sometimes what drives my thinking and where I decide to write more smart notes is based on how many people liked or viewed my post. Now, I'm not posting because I'm trying to be liked by a lot of people. It's more a matter of which idea sparks more interest, and then those are the ideas I try to build on. So it's a very powerful way to drive your work. It's almost like your workflow. You're in the state of flow as you do your workflow because you're working on the things that you're interested on. Now, how this translates to getting things done. For example, I had a presentation I did yesterday. It was with a group called Juno, and this happened yesterday. And when I talked to Juno about the presentation, they said they'd like to hear some thinking on the state of flow. And so I have a smart note on Flow 101. So 70% of my presentation is already complete because of my slip box. So here's a presentation ready to go. If I want to make some small tweaks for this particular workshop, it becomes very easy. They also want to know how you can use design thinking to plan your career. That part already exists. The part that didn't exist was how can I show my story in terms of my career and demonstrate the fact that it would have been impossible for me to plan my career. And so I only had to build one piece for this workshop because the other two pieces were in my treasure trove of ideas. So when I went to this task, I kind of started thinking about this topic of why career planning doesn't work. And the way I decided to kind of show my story, and I've never done this before, I did it for the first time yesterday, is I tell my story, my career story via all of the logos I've worked for. And when I kind of put this in slide mode, it shows the evolution of my career, and I can make quite a few points about why there's no way I could have planned my career. So now that I've built this, it's become another smart note that sits in my slip box that I may or may not use in the future, depending on the interest of this particular topic. But the fascinating thing for me is combining the slip box with getting things done has fundamentally improved my productivity because the Juno workshop had relatively little lead time. So it would have been very easy for me to say no if the amount of material I had to create was a little too overwhelming. But I jumped into this with 80% of it already done because of my pre-collected smart notes. Now, where version 12 has become incredibly powerful is, and it's ironic that I use a thought type called smart note, because Matt, I think when you refer to the notes pane of a thought, I think with good reason you've been using the term smart note as well. And so let me show you that a little bit. So this is the webinar that we're doing right now. I went into the announcement that Shelley distributed, and here's the topics that she said we'd be discussing, and I copied and pasted them right into the notes pane of this thought. And what you'll notice here is some links become automatically automatically present. So the first topic on the notification of this webinar was create a treasure trove of ideas. So you'll notice that treasure trove of ideas looks like a hyperlink now, because it is, because the brain's gone through itself and determined if I have any thoughts with the names with the names that match this text, in which case I do. So I click on treasure trove of ideas, and here we are right in the slip box. And so when I look at the webinar, I just, as long as I keep following this list, I'll make sure that I've demonstrated everything we promised I'd be demonstrating. And if I make notes to myself, and so I had created, I went to notes. Actually, I did it in an email, and I was sitting upstairs and I started thinking about, okay, how should you take smart notes? So let me create that thought. Let me just call it a topic now, because it's not quite a smart note. And then I'm going to copy and paste notes that I'd already taken via email, and I'm going to put them into the notes pane here. And you'll notice that some of the phrases are underlined. And so writing is thinking. So if I right click on writing is thinking, you'll see that it gives me the option. It's identified it as a pre-existing thought, and it gives me the option to turn that into a link, which I do. This is another pre-existing thought. I do the same thing. The reason this has fundamentally changed my productivity is my brain, my mind map has gotten big enough now that I actually start to lose track of things that I've captured somewhere else in my brain. And I now no longer have to worry about that, because with version 12, the index is kind of happening on my behalf, which has just stimulated a whole new set of ideas. So this is the digital equivalent of what Sankey Ahrens was writing in How to Take Smart Notes, where notes start to clump. And so then once a note starts to clump, I can just start using it. It'll become a future topic that at some point will appear in my slip box. So you'll notice here's the slip box thought types and subtypes. Here's the project thought types and thud types, subtypes. I've got quite a few other thought types that have been born over the last 15 years. And I may use them inadvertently or infrequently. If I find I'm using them quite often, then that means my thinking's evolving, and then I bring them into either the projects area or the slip box area. But the challenge to myself is that all of my thought types fit into either my treasure trove of ideas, which is my slip box, or my set of projects that are on the go for 2021. And so what I've also got incorporated in here is Sankey Ahrens, again, the author of How to Take Smart Notes, offers one-to-one coaching kind of on a paid basis. So I was fascinated by this whole approach, and so I booked a meeting with him. And in that meeting, he gave me quite a bit of kind of useful philosophy. And so I was taking notes in my journal, which I've brought into my mind map, and at some point, kind of at my own leisure, I can keep taking these words of advice that he gave me and slowly convert them into smart notes. The biggest piece of advice he gave is have your projects separate from your slip box. Don't let the two get too muddy, because then you have one big data bank, and that separation is valuable. So I've taken that to heart, and the way I've done that is by creating these two separate sets of thoughts. So I've got all these notes in here waiting for me to kind of slowly convert them into smart notes. And for me, with all the consulting I'm doing and some teaching I'm doing, in any spare time, if I create 5 or 6 smart notes per day, I consider myself successful, because they don't just accumulate additively, they have this compounding effect, especially when they start clumping around topics of interest. Let me just show you something else around. I think I've shown this. I've shown success disaster. I've shown why career planning doesn't work. As of the workshop yesterday, I forced myself to create this slide, which is now a permanent smart note. If it gets used frequently, it'll build into some other topic. If it doesn't get used frequently, it'll just fade away. Either way, I'm totally okay with that. It's a very organic and dynamic way of doing work. I had work with a couple of large companies, and again, with one company, they wanted a participant workbook. And they wanted a participant workbook with exercises that are tried and true and proven. So within my Slipbox, I actually have a section that's called workbooks. And in workbooks, I've got either 1 page or 2 pages, all made up of exercises that I know have worked because I've used them in my coaching engagements. So now that if I need to create a workbook for a specific engagement or a specific course, again, my starting point is 80% complete. All I need to do is maybe add a logo or two, maybe create a new exercise that I want to experiment with to see if it'll be a new smart note, and the rest is pre-existing right here. So for example, if I have a call with someone and we discuss the state of flow, I have built into a smart note a Word document with mail merge data that can produce this type of document based on your information instantly. So after we have the call, I thank you for the call and I email you this little tip sheet, and with the hopes that you find it interesting and valuable right away. And the ones that are popular end up appearing in future workbooks. So combination of how to take smart notes, getting things done, new features in version 12, and just mind mapping in general have made me feel like I'm really hitting the ground running in 2021. And I don't say that just from a productivity perspective. I also say that from a kind of a personal engagement perspective. So there it is at a high level, Matt. Are there any areas you want to dig deeper on or ask questions about?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much. We've got a lot of great questions for you. I was going to actually demonstrate and share a few of the features that you actually highlighted and that people have questions about. So I think maybe we could stay on your brain.
Sure.
And the first question that came in is regarding your all of your thought types. A lot of interest on the different thought types you've used, and some eagle eyes out there notice that some groups of thought types have dollar signs in front of them.
Yeah.
Some groups of thought types have @ symbols in front of them. And
Yeah.
can you tell us a little bit more about that? And also, someone noticed the color coding. Is there any methodology that you're using for color coding other than just making it a different color?
Sure. So with the dollar signs and the @ symbols, so in very simple terms, and again, subject to me changing if it doesn't make sense, but my thinking at the moment is an @ symbol implies a getting things done approach. So something I need to take some form of action on. It also helps me sort so that the actions I need to take appear on the left-hand side, just because of sorting by the @ symbol. The dollar symbol represents my treasure trove of ideas. So the smart notes section. So your treasure trove of ideas starts with a dollar symbol, and things that have to get done typically start with an @ symbol. Now you might notice exceptions to that, but that's kind of what my approach was initially. In terms of the color coding, I mean, in some way, there's some logic to it. Yellow for me represents projects I need to get done. I don't have an explanation on why that is. Yellow has just always been project for me. And green has been, there's my actions. And so again, if I go back to using what I have to get done in January as a dashboard, I don't have to read a single thing to get a sense of how big my workload is and how much of my workload I've completed. Red implies that I've completed it. So I use red for either reference something that's completed or something that's inactive. Green means it's live and I need to get it done. And the reason this is a lighter green, because these are actions from last year, and you'll notice this thought type, I actually went in and I changed the thought type from at SNA 2020 Q4 to the letter Y, SNA 2020 Q4. And the only reason I added the letter Y is so that it would sort to the right. So it kind of reminds me these actions are from the past, and you need to decide if you want to keep them current or not. Now I know I need to call Margot, and so right here I'll just change the thought type, and now calling Margot, you know, all of a sudden appears over here. So it's an action I know I want to get done. So it's a way for me to process my work, and the approach I'm trying to follow here is kind of related to Scrum, where your work in progress is also your communication tool. So does that answer that question, Matt?
Yeah, that's fantastic. That's great. And that actually answered my next question. Someone noticed a Y as a
Yeah.
different symbol in front. So you
Yeah.
hit upon that as well.
Yeah, purely for sorting. I really find the sorting powerful.
Great, wonderful. And next question came in from Adam, actually. Liked your references of the different books, and do you have a favorite book or resource specifically on mind mapping?
I would have to say probably the contender for my favorite book of all time, and it's the way I'm using a reference for mind mapping is the How to Take Smart Notes. Because although How to Take Smart Notes is based on somebody who had a wooden box with pieces of paper in it, and the fact he was able to do that with 90,000 pieces of paper is fascinating to me, but turning that into technology is the best reference. It's the best way to learn mind mapping, in my opinion. So I don't have another. The other reference for me is my brain. I just use my brain to learn how to get better at it. And if you look at the demo brain, this is the one that I'm making available here. I mean, it's really, for me, it's really this easy. If I'm going to, let's say I'm going to have work potentially with Microsoft, then now work with Microsoft is born. I know they're interested in discussing Flow. I know that from a conversation we had. So I bring in the things that I already know are pre-existing. I know they want a workbook. So I can just start. You never start with a blank sheet of paper again. So in terms of a reference to learn how to mind map, honestly, for me, it's just the more you play with your mind map, the more you learn about how to use it.
Great. And question is, will all of your thought types be included in the brain that you'll be sharing with us?
The thought types I'm going to include are the slipbox thought types. So this is my latest thinking. I've talked about these three. I haven't talked about these two. A thought is simply a thought that'll become a smart note at some point, but it isn't quite a smart note yet. So maybe I need to still work on my wording. Maybe it's a quote from someone else and I haven't thought about it in my own words. So it's a budding smart note. And then reference is again, from an academic perspective, if you want to keep track of your references, especially if you're publishing, then this is where I would store my references. So these will be included in the brain I'm sharing. And then I'm sharing my latest getting things done thought types. I'm not sharing all of my historical old ones because I've learned from them. I don't use them as much anymore. And so I am including my reading list and those thought types. So we're looking at the demo brain here, and I've thrown in, if I remember correctly, I think I've thrown in for fun. Yeah, I've thrown in some of the smart notes for fun.
Great, good. And the next question from someone that's seen you on one of our webinars in the past.
Yeah.
Knowing that you've been a longtime user of the brain, and I think you sort of showed this when you showed that you can move a person from one thought type to another. You need to give this person a call, so you bump them up to a more urgent thought type. But
Yeah.
this cleanup or management of such a large brain ever become an issue for you?
Well, so I wouldn't say it's become an issue. It's become a teaching moment. So when I had the project thought type, and I wasn't distinct in my project thought type. I just called it projects. And as we saw when we connected, Matt, I can't remember how many there were there now. I think there were over 1,000 projects. So is that an issue? I mean, you can argue it is. Am I going to go back and clean it up? No, I'm not going to go back and clean it up. It'll get cleaned up organically because I've created a new thought type that is 2021 projects. What I'm working on now is what'll appear. If there's a project I was doing in the past that's relevant or valid, I'll discover it through the search window. And then when I discover one of those projects through the search window, I just flip it to 2021. So over time, that old big list will dwindle. I'm not going to go into that big list and try to do that form of cleanup. I think that's one of the things I've learned from productivity is you should index for retrieval, not archival. Index in such a way that you'll stumble across something when you need it the most. So has it become an issue for me? No. Is it a teaching moment? Yes.
Great, great. And I think maybe we'll wrap it up. There's a lot of questions. Jay certainly had his hands full, and thank you everyone for presenting questions. There's no way we'll be able to get to all of these today, and maybe some of them are repeat questions as well.
Can I give my email though, Matt?
Absolutely, feel free.
If you want to email me, I can't guarantee when, but I can guarantee I'll respond. omer@peakperformance.engineering.
Great, and we'll include that in our follow-up message as well, so you can get in touch with Omer in the future directly. So thank you, Omer, for sharing that with us. And I guess the final question is since it is such a repeat question, while there's a few, regardless, the statistics on your brain, how many thoughts, people want to know, do you have in your brain?
Well, it's funny you say that, Matt, because right before we started the webinar, I was wondering the same thing because it's been a long time since I've checked, but I couldn't remember how you check. So do you mind telling me? Let's all find out.
Sure. Just click on File and go to Statistics.
Okay, so get ready. We're all going to find out at the same time.
There it is. Calculating. There it is.
So how many thoughts do I have?
46,000 thoughts.
So there you go, 46,000. I thought I had more than that.
And 60,000 links. That means there's a lot of cross references in there.
Well, and I hope from the Smart Notes perspective, I hope at least Smart Notes demonstrated the unorthodox connection between two thoughts is where ideas are born.
Fantastic. Fantastic. Well, thank you so much, Omer. Thank you for joining us today once again. We had a couple of technical glitches today, but you handled them like a champ, and we got through those.
No problem.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. As we mentioned, Jay might not have been able to get to all of your questions. We're quickly approaching the top of the hour, so we're going to sign off on today's webinar. You will receive an email with a recording of today's event, as well as ways to contact Omer. You can also find Omer. I've watched his TED Talk video on YouTube. He writes some really great articles on the web, and we'll make sure those are all available to you as well. So thanks, Omer. Thanks for joining us once again, and thank you, everyone, for enjoying our presentation today, and enjoy the brain in the future.
Thank you, Matt. Take care, everyone.
Bye, everyone.